Blockchain Interviews, hosted by Dan Weiskopf. Each episode features interviews with leading industry experts so that viewers can have a deeper understanding of today's quickly evolving blockchain marketplace.
Today we have Dave Perrill, CEO of CompuNorth, doing the blockchain interview series with me. And I'm super excited to have Dave here. You know, he runs a very large miner that is private. Most of the interviews that we do are with public companies. And so my hope, Dave, is that we'll talk a lot about, you know, how structure matters, but also private versus public, the advantages between the two, how you came into the blockchain crypto market, and maybe a little bit of a tidbit about how the YPO organization has helped you. So again, thank you very much for joining me here.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
So Dave, let's just jump right into it because, you know, at the end of the day, we'd love to know a lot more about you. Speak a little bit about your journey, how you came to the epiphany that the world's going to change as a result of crypto and blockchain, and you know, a little bit about CompuNorth, because a lot of folks don't know that much about it.
Yeah, no, happy to give you the story. So I think by way of background, I come from 25 years data centers managed services. So 3-time founder, 3 startups under my belt. So a bit of a glutton for punishment. The most relevant, I think, for the discussion purposes today was an internet service provider that I started in the mid 90s. So we did data centers, managed hosting. I'll date myself a little bit, but we had dial-up services back in the day and DSL, and pivoted heavily into managed networks and managed security in the mid 2000s. So you remember there were a lot of breaches going on, a lot of security issues with credit card data, a lot of people getting their information stolen, and we really had some great industry tailwinds within that. I did see a movement of, you know, really these services starting to go to the cloud. This is when the hyperscalers are really starting to come into play. Folks like AWS, folks like Google, Microsoft, et cetera. And just the scale and the level of investment that was going in and the ability to run applications on the cloud made so much sense to me. I thought that the traditional data center world candidly was doomed. And in 2012, I sold my business. So I sold the company, our 2 data centers, our managed services portfolio, to a company called Trustwave out of Chicago. Subsequently became Singapore Telecom, $54 billion organization. So it really kind of went to the upper echelons and became kind of the one of their main centers for managed services for the SMB marketplace. I did another software as a service startup within that and didn't think I'd be in infrastructure ever again. 2017 rolled around. I started reading some topics on Bitcoin and blockchain. I got really intrigued. And then I really discovered more about the mining part of it, which was really, you know, paralleled a lot of the journeys that I had in running an internet service provider in the 90s. What was very different to me was the scale and the focus on economics, which were very much different from my day. When I was looking at the data centers, we were much more concerned about uptime, availability, like costs really were very less much of a driver. And this market was very much predicated around sourcing and finding strategic energy sources at scale and at low cost. And through, you had mentioned YPO, a Young Presidents Organization for your viewers on here, has just been a tremendous organization for me. In terms of a professional network of like-minded CEOs that are really looking to grow and scale, a lot of personal development, professional development, and also a lot of networking. And through that network, I met my now co-founder, PJ Lee. And PJ comes from 27 years of investment banking, primarily around power in the last 15 years in solar and wind. And so a large scale energy background and understanding. And the two of us joined forces. My wife thought I was having an affair because I was texting this guy PJ so much at all hours of the night. And then within a couple of weeks, both of them had what amounted to upwards of 8 figures of our own personal portfolios into the business to start CompuNorth. And initially, it was really around being a miner. We liked the economics. We thought it was really interesting. We were looking to find ways to drive a low cost, but candidly, we didn't want to do the management, the hosting, the development. We knew how much work that was. And so we looked for some hosts. And what we couldn't find was a host that could do it cost effectively could do it at scale and could do it at the speed that we needed. The crypto hosts candidly were either backed up or they just didn't have, a trustworthy background that we felt comfortable with. The data center providers were just overbuilt. They were too expensive. They either had high energy costs relative to what we were trying to do, and their infrastructure, well, it was fantastic, just was the overhead needed to get paid for in some way, shape, or form. And we don't think that facilitated it with crypto. So from that, we were, kind of forced to go on our own, find our own and source our own energy. And that was really through PJ's network. And we ended up in a small town in West Texas. Texas is one of the largest deregulated energy grids in the world. We had low cost economics. We could, really understand the pricing and take advantage of some systems. And that was our first, foray into this. And through that, we found out this was a valuable service and product that others needed as well. And so we pivoted from self-mining really to hosting and co-location. And fast forward here, three and a half, 4 years, we now have 3 data centers under management. We have another 5 that are under development. And, we've become one of the premier go-to providers in this sector and in this space to help miners scale, to help them drive to low cost and to do it in a very rapid fashion. And while today we see, cryptocurrency, we see mining, we see it, this whole sector of, proof of work and the consensus algorithm behind that being the primary driver, we see a whole new advent of computing, what we call tier 0. And what we mean by that is traditional data centers are tier 1 to tier 4. The higher up you go on the scale, the more redundancies, the more bells and whistles, and frankly, the more costs. And the high echelon is where, mission critical databases and those kind of things belong. We think there's another tier that belongs, which is tier 0, which is just doing compute at the utmost or the lowest possible cost at the right appropriate times anywhere in the world. And that doesn't need to be just crypto. It can be things like machine learning. It can be things like, graphic rendering. It can be things like HPC. Any computationally intensive, non-mission critical work, we think belongs in these types of environments. And that's really the thesis and what is Compute North has become to, or has started to start the market up.
Wow, you threw a lot at me. So that was great, man. So let's jump right in on some of the Q&A. So I'm the guy who always talks about how structure matters, right? So talk to me, and I've broken this down into like 4 categories here. So let's only do one at a time though. So private versus public is the first category, and then I'm going to ask you about geography, why those 3 states, and please tell me a little bit about difficulty rate and then mining pools. So private versus public. You sit on the board of Hive. That's a public company, right? You're private. What are the advantages when you look at between private versus public?
Yeah, I mean, on the public side, the advantages certainly are access and cost of capital. Like, no question about it. The ability to scale and grow as a public company is much easier just by that ability to tap the marketplace and to get the low cost debt and even low cost equity. I know it's unquestionable that the markets as we see them today are becoming a scale and an economics game, and access to capital and driving your lowest cost of capital are going to continue to be important. As a private company, you don't have that. The advantages on the private side, I think, are just the ability to be nimble and candidly the ability not to give out all your secret sauce. When you're a public company, the disclosure mechanisms and the things that you need to do around your contracts and your approach, and even some of the things that you're putting into place to kind of bring it together, you need to disclose and put that all out there. Now, I do think there's always a premium on execution. I think people sometimes overlook that when they look at moats and capabilities and skill sets. I mean, I always think a moat is just having an unbelievable ability to get things done and do it more rapidly than anybody else and be ahead of that curve. So you can eliminate that to a certain point of things you're disclosing. You already did 3-6 months ago, and you're already on to the next thing. But it's certainly, obviously, there's overhead, and there's, it's going to slow you down. There's no question about it. But I do think in this market space of where we see it going, I think access to the public markets is a big advantage.
Yeah, I don't think people really fully appreciate how expensive it is to borrow money when it comes to the crypto mining area, right? Because we got double-digit borrowing rates. So it makes some sense. So what about you?
It's going to be interesting if it follows kind of a similar trajectory to wind and solar, which had the same problems 15-20 years ago. When they were first advocated, people didn't know what they were. They didn't know how to underwrite them. They thought it was a bit experimental. I think cryptos is still a bit in that phase. long term, I think being able to get low cost project based SPV debt is really the key to unlocking a lot of things here. We're tapping on the doors of some pretty big institutions and looking to structure some of the things going on in the future to do it that way. And I think once some of that capital is available, it really opens up the doors to a lot of avenues to get exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. You're in 3 states, right? South Dakota, Nebraska, and Texas, right? Utilities are benefiting in a huge way by crypto mining, right? How are you tapping into the opportunity with utility companies?
Yeah, our approach has really been to be a partner with the utility companies, the grid operators, the IPPs, and anyone else, with the energy complex. I think the days of what I'd consider a parasitic load are done. And what I mean by that is when you get in a zero sum game, have a discussion with the energy company, they want to sell it for higher and you want to buy it for less. I don't think that's a good approach. What has benefited us and been successful has been in let's find a way to work together. Let's find out where we can locate our load, where you want us to place it, where you have existing infrastructure, and where you might have either stranded assets or stranded types of energy components. And then let's bring the things that are really unique and share in the value. For example, the ability to curtail and shut down loads when emergency situations or high grid pricing or lack of wind power or whatever that might be is immense to these guys. And the size and scale of loads that we can bring, to your point, is extremely valuable. I think one of the other things that Compute North has been able to point at a track record of working within the communities, bringing jobs, bringing investment, and being a long-term partner of the community. And that's been really important. Even if these new site developments, they've candidly accelerated so much by our ability to talk about our partnerships with Shell and Nebraska Power District and Mid-American and some of these large-scale utilities that candidly 4 or 5 years ago, we're looking at crypto with a pretty interesting eye. Now we got obviously a track record of paying our bills, bringing investment, bringing employment opportunities, and again, just being an overall good citizen in the community. And that's been obviously imperative to continue to progress, I think, the entire industry forward.
Yeah. Now, some people may not realize, but we're talking about like $1 million bills. Right? These are big invoices, right?
We get a really nice gift basket from Christmas.
So Nebraska, South Dakota, Texas. What other states are friendly in your mind to crypto?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll flip it on its head. I think there's ones that aren't. You and I are both in New York right now, and that's one of them that candidly we've avoided. We've had a number of projects, some opportunities. The grid here is really interesting. There's the opportunity to participate in ancillary services, which is the optionality to shut off, and those are the kind of markets that we look for. The problem really is the politics. We look for a number of things when we go into the states. Obviously, the number one driver is going to be the economics of the energy. It's just simply that's a yes or no. Either we can make it work or we can't. But the business climate is right behind that. And then the actual climate itself, actual weather, is the other piece. I mean, all those things need to come together. And then there's going to be other third things like, connectivity, labor, tax ramifications of that. But those first three are really the primary drivers. But we do have much more of a portfolio approach. We don't want to entirely be in Texas. We don't want to, there's a lot of companies out there that I think are like one state and this is the solution. That's not the way we approach it. And candidly, we're not only US only either. We're open to other, global opportunities. We're talking to a lot of them right now, but we're also a big believer of the easy button, right? The United States has the largest power grid in the world, some of the best economics. It's got some of the largest scale, and we're happy here. We spend a lot of time in Canada and the Nordics. We spend time in the Middle East. There's all other types of opportunities. I think that's going to continue to expand and grow. And I think having that portfolio of knowing that some of these opportunities are going to maybe only be for 3 to 5 years, and then they're going to move. And we're willing to work within that and continue to shift as the power and the energy landscape continues to shift as well.
So, okay, New York, no. Wyoming? Because I love site visits. I love site visits, by the way.
So yeah, the 3 states that we're in today are Texas, Nebraska, and South Dakota. I think they all share very similar characteristics of we've had great power partners, we have low cost energy. There's been a large renewable mix within the equation, and then we've had just great support from the state and at the local level. I mean, I'll tell you, like our economic development director in Nebraska, for example, was just unbelievable. I mean, the amount of work he did for us, the way he advocated for us, it was just amazing how they embraced us and worked within that. So it's not always even on a state by state level. It can get down to a community level of what makes sense. And we continue to look at that. So, I mean, I think Texas will continue to expand. There's no question about that. We have several projects within that. We're certainly, looking at Nebraska as well. If you kind of look at all those states within, kind of the with the large scale wind and up and down that alley, it makes a lot of sense for us just to a number of reasons that just the energy construct, the economics, and just the pro business sentiment overall that they have.
Okay, so coming back around to the whole concept about how structure matters, can you explain to some of our listeners two issues: what difficulty rate is, and then why is a mining pool important?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll start with the difficulty rate question. Difficulty rate is, I think, just really a proxy for the amount of computational power that is on the Bitcoin network at any one point in time. And I think the easiest way to think about it is that miners get a set reward every 10 minutes, right? And that's on a preset basis. And they get over time. Now, what's interesting, I'll talk about this a little bit in the context of the pool. Over time, they get a percentage of those rewards based on their overall computational power as a percentage of the overall network. So the higher that difficulty rate is, meaning the higher the overall computational hash rate is, the more computational hash rate you need to have to get the same amount of rewards. So let's say you have 5% of the overall hash rate. Over time, you're going to get 5% of the Bitcoin. If that difficulty rate goes up by 10%, and you don't change anything, by definition, you're going to lose 10% of your previous earnings. And so it's really a linear equation of that pie, knowing the pie does not change, except for halvenings. And I don't know if we'll have a chance to talk about that, but every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin, that pie actually gets smaller over time. So, but that Bitcoin that's actually rewarded is produced, and that's something that's set in code. To the question of the mining pools is really what allows you to join with other people to get better predictability of how you get your rewards. And what I mean by that is that without the pools, you would have an extremely lumpy type of reward mechanism. So the point of, let's say you did control 5% of the hash rate, which is pretty large, you would only, by definition, only 5% of the time actually win and get the rewards. Now, when you won, it'd be a huge boon. And then when you did it, it'd be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and you'd be working through that. What the pools do is help put everyone to collaborate together. And when anyone wins within the pool, it all gets shared. And so instead of having these real high highs and low lows, you have much more consistent earnings over time. And as a result, though, the pool does take, a percentage or a half percentage of those rewards to pay for their services and their infrastructure and everything. But the bulk of the users, because the Bitcoin network has gotten so large, now do participate in pools. They don't do what's called solo mining, where they don't use it. And it simply makes sense, again, just to really reiterate some predictability and some consistency amongst the way that you get return.
Yeah, our emphasis is on the ecosystem, of course, right? And what you just described, or the pools specifically, can be a separate business unto itself, right?
Completely.
But on the question of difficulty rate, so your business is very capital intensive. How do you deal with that issue, that unknown on what the difficulty rate is? And can you give us a sense of where you might see the difficulty rate going in 2022?
Yeah, I don't think it's as unknown as you think. What I see is a lot of naivety in terms of where it's going to go, and a lack of science and a lack of statistics. I think if you really follow the trajectory, there's 4, maybe in some constructs 6 manufacturers of machines. You really understand what amount's going to go online. You really have an understanding of what's their fabrication, timelines, and when are these machines actually going to turn on. And when you start to look at the science, I think you can really understand where that difficulty rate will go. What I see is a lot of people not take that into account and kind of go up and to the right and only kind of work with the price changes and the corrections. If we take a step back, like what's going to happen over the course of the next 28 months, this is kind of, I mean, I've been saying this for quite a while, and it still amazes me that people kind of get shocked, but minor revenues in my eyes are going to decrease by 90%. And there's two key factors. One is the fact that we're going to see a halvening in 28 months at this point in time. So by definition, that's going to be a 50% reduction. I think we're going to see the Bitcoin network 4x from the low. So, you know, if you just look at the data and the numbers and the amount of machines that are coming online, you know, I think the China migration, if you will, was a blip. And it was a blip.
Big blip.
It's a point in time. And I think it's a point in time of profitability. And I think people should be like, that was great, but I can't count on that going forward. I can, you know, it was great to have that time when, hey, we were all making a lot more money than we were previously because there was less people in the pool, but it's going to come back to normalcy. And the fact of the matter is there are just large school institutions. I look at what we're going to put online alone. And I know there's other folks that are, you know, doing the same thing that we're doing at, you know, similar types of scale. Like combining all that type of network power, it's going to really push out, I'd consider, you know, the small retail miners or the folks that simply don't have either the capital or a low cost position. And I think when you take that in, it's going to be pretty impactful to the people that aren't prepared for it. Now, I will say the bulk of our customers are long-term players. So they're putting significant balance sheets to work. They're playing long-term game. I mean, they want to simply get token on balance sheet. They're not as interested about what is the current price versus my cost and do I care about it at that point in time. They're going to find other ways to raise cash to provide for that operating expense and continue to get the machines. And I think they really see it as an arbitrage of mining versus buying on the open market, and kind of the best approach. But I do think, you know, we've seen this market before. We'll see it again. And then I think post-halvening is going to be the people that are really positioned to have a strong balance sheet and candidly have a little bit of the ability to run into that black hole sometimes when things don't always look good, knowing that the market's going to react on the other side. So it's the hoot spot, if you will, right?
Wow. So let's set the room up for a little bit on what you just talked about. You were only talking about Bitcoin, or were you talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum?
I'm only talking about Bitcoin on this
Okay,
one.
perfect.
Yeah.
So
Ethereum's a different animal.
A different animal. So you're talking about potentially an increase of that industry revenues from, we'll say, 9 billion run rate, 10 billion run rate, up 90% in 2022. You're a private company. I can pigeonhole you.
No, so what I'm saying a 90% decrease on a per BTC basis to actual miners. So decrease. So
Decrease.
A decrease, yeah. So if I'm making 10 BTC right now, I think in 28 months I'm making 1 BTC. Now the
Right,
price
so
correction,
you're talking about the difficulty rate, and
because of the fact that we have
you.
a halvening and a difficulty rate increase. And I think the third thing is there a price correction or not? Historically, prior to a halvening, there has been. Now, on the other side of it, it balances out. But I just think, again, I think there's a lot of, you know, miners that are a little bit new to the market space that aren't prepared for that. I'll say the bulk of our customers are like, they get it. They're playing long ball. They're getting the scale, you know, and candidly, that's why we're partnering with them. And it's our job to make them successful. But that's why we've also had a myopic focus of efficiency and cost, right? Because we believe it is so important, not just to build for today, but to build for what's going to happen in 28 months.
So coming back to my question though, and I guess is, so when we're looking at the industry, the Bitcoin mining industry, on a run rate basis, it's someplace around 8 billion, sometimes 10 billion. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yep. In terms of BTC produced, what's mined, and how it's
straight. And obviously we don't know what the price will be. I mean, that's like that huge unknown, right? But are you in a position to like make a guesstimate? Because here you are with budgets and making, you know, financial projections on how you want to build out your business, right? You know, where do you see the industry going?
Oh, I mean, I can continue to see it grow and scale. I don't think there's any question about it. You know, what gave me solace in 2017 and starting the business is Bitcoin going to go to zero? Like that was my fundamental concern and my fundamental risk. And I'll just say over the last 4 years, even the last 12 months, that has been so fundamentally de-risked by the magnitude and scale and prestige of the financial institutions that are starting to back this and get behind it. Like the cat's out of the bag. But the question is, how do you build for long term? And again, Bitcoin's fungible. Hash rate and Bitcoin, I will both, argue are commodities. Doesn't matter where it's produced. There's really no way to compete on that specific point. And that's where, again, I think being a really efficient, really smart miner is where you absolutely need to go. Now, there's the ESG footprint, the renewable footprint. I think long term, those are going to converge, meaning the most cost effective are also going to be the most green. I think that's really exciting for the industry, and we're excited to be on the leadership position on that. But, technologies around, software optimization, things like immersion cooling, being able to do some of these technologies at scale, even tapping new power sources, I think are very intriguing and compelling. And but you can't sit on your laurels, right? It's a very competitive market, and you got to continue to innovate and push that forward. And again, I'll reiterate it. It's our job to make our customers extremely successful by doing it quickly, doing it with a high level of trust and credibility and execution, and then driving them to low cost and most efficient as much as possible in every single avenue we can.
Now, so structure matters. You're a hoster. You're not mining for your own book. Is that fair to say?
Minimally. Yeah. We have our toe in the water in essence, so we can optimize our customers' operations.
And why is that? Why was that a strategy for you?
Well, if you think about it, so the things that we also bring to the table is the infrastructure. We bring software. We have our own mining platform called Miner Sentry that gives us full, health insight into every single miner, every single device. We have a huge data lake of information of everything from hash rate, board temps, to air temps, to fan speeds, to what does the pool look like. We help our customers, the public companies, reconcile pool hash rates, actual machine hash rates, understanding any kind of discrepancies between the two and being able to reconcile that for their audits, all those types of technologies, just being able to get through closing your books faster, for example, as an efficiency step, right? Being able to overclock 10, 30, 40%, whatever that might be in immersion and get an extra 2 years on your machine life. That's huge. I mean, all those kind of things are the things that we're looking to continually push and again, provide to our customers. So understanding mining is essential to us, but we're not in the business or the market to compete with our clients. I think we've taken a little bit different route than some of the other hosting providers, and there's some other, great companies out there, but, we're really energy first. And again, we're infrastructure and co-location. We're not a self miner. That's not our business.
Okay. So again, structure matters. Sorry to pound away on the whole thing.
Structure matters. So
I do. I have one.
All right.
So let's talk a little bit about the possibility of proof of stake versus proof of work, right? Could the miners also have a side pocket eventually, and do proof of stake?
Well, in Bitcoin, no.
Not in Bitcoin, but
Yeah.
but if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, listen, there is a risk," and maybe you're the wrong person to ask this question because you're solely focused on Bitcoin. Maybe I'll.
Well, so we do Ethereum, we do Zcash, we do Monero. I mean, we do anything that's proof of work algorithm based. I mean, I think I certainly have an understanding of this, and I follow it very closely. I mean, I think one of the exciting things about the DeFi universe and generally is there's last count, there was 30 different types of consensus algorithms that are being tested and worked through. And I think that's amazing. I think that's great. I mean, innovation in the scale, in the space, I think is a great thing. I think proof of stake is really intriguing. I think it's really interesting. I think it's also got some non-technical problems that are going to surface. And the biggest one I think is going to be, with proof of stake, if you think about it, it's not that much different than what they're trying to get away from in the real world by whoever has the most money makes the rules. And that is similar to the way proof of stake works, that those who have the most money at stake are the ones that are validating, are the ones that are actually, making some of the decisions on the network. And I think that could be a problem. I think what proof of work has is that it's got 13 years of track record. It's got, it's been proven, and it's got scale. Proof of stake isn't there yet. Will it get there? Maybe. I mean, I'm cheering for it. I hope it will, but I don't think it's bad to have a couple different ways to approach this. And I don't think there needs to be just one main crypto. What I will say is that I think Bitcoin has a huge first mover advantage. I think the 13 years of track record are immense. And one thing I know about technology is that once there's something in place, even if it's not the absolute best thing, if it's pretty darn good, you got to have something that's about 10x better in order to usurp it. I mean, I still know customers that were still producing, payroll checks on AS400s. And why? Because it worked and there wasn't a better system that really made sense for them. I mean, if you look at IP, the internet protocol, we're still on IPv4, which was originally designed, I want to say in the 70s. IPv6 came out in 1998, and less than 2% of nodes still natively run IPv6. That's because IP4 is great and it's standard and it's there. And it's going to take so much more to usurp that to really push us to ever make that move. And I think Bitcoin is kind of in that same spot. It enjoys those network effects. It enjoys the standardization. And it has the track record. And, I think that's going to continue to grow it and propel it. So, I mean, I got a lot of confidence that Bitcoin is going to be one of the winners long term, but I don't think it's the only one. I think Ethereum, I think Cardano, I think there's, a lot of these, different unique approaches. But, who's going to win? A lot of it depends on execution. I think Ethereum had a first mover, but they're slow. Like the innovation is really slow on that network. And what we'll see is the move from proof of work to proof of stake going to work, or are there going to be other unforeseen economic circumstances that no one's thought of at scale? I think some of the genius behind Bitcoin wasn't just technical. Some of the ideas behind it, like the algorithms and the math and the difficulty and there's so much forethought, but there was also just some amazing insight into economics and human behavior. And that's where I think sometimes it doesn't quite get the credit it deserves, because it solved a lot more than just technology problems. It really got into the way that people work and the way that people trust. And it really got into the work that people will behave given or not given incentives. And I think it's pretty amazing how that was all built into a 20-some page white paper.
It's not very long.
I'm grasping it, much less writing it. And that's where it's pretty impressive. I hope someday the real inventor or Satoshi Nakamoto actually comes to bear, because I think it's just too much of a genius invention to go anonymous forever. So, but we'll see.
When I go to your website, CompuNorth, CompuNorth.com, right? We can say that.
Yeah. CompuNorth.com.
So one of the things that intrigues me is you can, I think, if you're using your hosting services, other people can choose different equipment, right? You're equipment agnostic for the most part, right?
Correct. Yep.
Where do you stand on concerns about technology obsolescence? I mean, is that a worry for you over the next 2-3 years?
We manage it. One of the ways that we do that is, we're not going to take, 3-generational equipment. We just simply won't. It's not worth our capital expenditure in order to do so. We know all the equipment mining gear out there. Our engineers have insight to, what's the efficiency, what is the electrical draw, what gear works, what doesn't. So we certainly know that. And, it's always scaling. The one thing about technology, I think you got to be really comfortable with change. You got to be really comfortable with innovation, knowing that everything that you put out today is going to be, obsolete in a certain period of time. And Bitcoin mining and this technology is no different. I do think what's going to change is as I think more of these power opportunities get really interesting to be able to leverage. Like, for example, some of our West Texas sites will run literally negative electricity rates at night. Like, those are perfect opportunities to run older generation gear for only maybe 6 hours a day. But instead of actually paying the grid to take the energy, and the reason they do that is because of tax equity and tax credits on these types of wind farms. And they still need to run it and produce it, even if they're underwater on the actual grid itself. But even if you're selling it for zero, isn't that a good deal? And as some of this, I think there will ultimately be a farm system where you think about it, where latest generation gear is running at a 95 or greater type of environment. Second generation gear is maybe 70, 80%. And third gen literally goes to the farm and it runs when possible. And like, as we get bigger farms and more capacity and more of a portfolio, I think that'll be the kind of world that we live in. So it gives a longer lifespan to some of this equipment and this gear, but I don't think the innovation is going to slow down. I do think one thing on the equipment side, it'll be really interesting to see how the markets look over the next 3 to 4 years, and if and when some of the bigger U.S. based domestic chip makers get into this, like if Intel or Nvidia or any some of the bigger names got interest in this, it would put some real heavy heat on the Bitmains and the micro BTs. And I think competition in this kind of space is always a good thing, but I think it'd continue that escalate kind of that arms race to bigger, better, faster.
So I always ask the guests some wild card questions at the end. So looking out a couple of years, what do you think investors are not looking at in terms of the blockchain as an opportunity?
Specifically to mining, or just in general?
In general.
I think everybody's and this is typical, right? I think they're overestimating the change in what's going to happen in the next year to two, but I think they're significantly underestimating the magnitude of shifts in the next 10.
Yeah.
And I think the technology, people confuse a lot of the times, the currency side with blockchain in general. I think the real revolution is just, trustless types of execution, whether that be contracts or currencies or whatever it might be. But, just some of the things that could even happen with, reserve currencies and the approach of this on a global basis are going to be really interesting. And if you start to think about the magnitude of change and the innovation and the disruption that it starts to create, the opportunities are endless. And it's not just strict software and blockchain. It's going to be the tidal effect of all the other industries that are going to be affected by it, and just the changes that are going to occur, and how do you get ahead of that, right? And timing is everything. Sometimes I think it's being able to be at the right place at the right time. A lot of times that is, you need to hold on until the market's right. And I see a lot of times, entrepreneurs and investors, like they have the right idea, they have the right thesis. They don't have the perseverance to sit through it to when the market is really ready.
So when you're looking at industries, eliminate financial services for a second. Which industries do you think will have the biggest impact on the blockchain, from the blockchain? Healthcare, as an example.
Yeah, anything that needs centralized federated identity or authentication, or like a single source of truth. Logistics to me is like kind of one of the easy ones, right? Like, yeah. Absolutely. You have so many different players. You have one source of truth. How do you go about that? Medicine is certainly another one. I think one of the big areas would be to see with government. If you think about all the documentation and authentication pieces that they need to do, they need to work within, whether that be your ID, whether that be deeds, whether that be titles, even things like lawsuits and things that are ultimately like judgments. Being able to put those kind of things in an essence where it's a single source of truth, and everybody looks at that, I think are going to be really, really, really game changing types of tech. And again, I think it's going to be limitless in terms of how this changes things.
So maybe it's going to be the politicians, trustless execution. We can put them all on the blockchain. I'm just kidding.
Well,
sorry.
Some of the push, even with social media, like that's one of the big challenges is people hate the fact that you're in a walled scenario and you don't own your data. Blockchain fundamentally could change that. There's a lot of people attacking that, and I think that's where you own your data. You can opt into whether you want to be a part of ads or whether you want to be the product or those kind of components. The Wall Street Journal articles last week on Facebook, I think candidly were a lot of things all of us thought. We just didn't have proof, didn't have evidence.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad for young teens. It creates image issues. There's a lot of anger and a lot of things. And, social media, well, it has certainly done some good things. It's also done a lot of bad. And it's also exposed kind of when you are the product and you are the data, some of the control that you lose within that. And fundamentally, it's just some bad things for society as a whole. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think the blockchain has the opportunity to really revolutionize that.
Dave, thank you so much today for the time. Look forward to seeing you continue to block and tackle to your success. And be well.
Thank you, Dan. We're fortunate to have a great team, some great clients. It's a fun market with great people, and wish you well. And thank you for having me on. Look forward to doing it again, hopefully soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.